Are we set to see some shock exits in the summer window? And is there still a strong possibility we could sign Victor Osimhen? Lots to break down, lots to discuss, so I hope you guys enjoy. Hit that like button, all that good stuff, and let's get straight into things. We kick things off by discussing the latest reports coming out from France right now in regards to Wesley FOFANA, because French reports reveal that there's a possibility we could be open to FOFANA leaving us on loan or on a permanent deal. Now, on a permanent deal basis, reports reveal that ideally we want around 80 mil euros, which means that realistically, at the current climate of where FOFANA finds himself now with his injury history, fitness and form, realistically only Saudi clubs could afford that. But Saudi clubs this summer are hoping to sign some of Europe's, top young players, and FOFANA would very much fall in their bracket. But on a more realistic alternative, a loan move could happen. And Marseille are one of the favourites to make something happen if that becomes a possibility. Now, earlier during the start of the season, we learned of FOFANA's love for his boyhood club in Marseille, and he revealed that he would never rule out the possibility of one day signing for them. At the moment, Marseille are second in the table, and they've essentially nearly bagged a CL spot at the end of the season, which probably would make things even more exciting for FOFANA if he decides to take that loan move to Marseille. Now, from our perspective, the report reveals that naturally there have been some frustrations about the stop-start nature of FOFANA's career. So many long-term injuries that have kind of stopped him from really progressing or developing, to be fair with you. And I've been making this comment for a long time, but he's 24 years old, but he has the playing experience of like a 21-year-old because he's missed out on that much football. And I still think that you do see these youthful signs in his game that still exist. An example I brought earlier was the fact that, in 14 games he's played for us this season, he's got 7 yellow cards. He's still quite rash with his decision-making. And maybe the club feel like if FOFANA was to get a loan move, it opens up a few doors and a few possibilities. On one hand, just playing consistently week in, week out at a club that has a very strong environment could put FOFANA back in a stronger position in the future. Option B, he has a successful loan and we're able to then sell him for a higher fee. Or option C, we look to sell him right now, because we have long-term interest in Dean Howson, who is the major signing we want to get completed before the start of the Club World Cup, and Marc Guéhi, who we made intense efforts for in the January window. And you know what? I feel like, would it surprise me if FOFANA left? Maybe not. I remember once upon a time when news first emerged of our interest to sign FOFANA from Leicester City. I'm still going to stand by what I said, but I thought at the time, why are we spending so much money on a talented kids when we had a Marc Guéhi who, you know what I mean? I didn't see too much of a difference in terms of their play style. And I think FOFANA, he's falling in that bracket of the potential FC player. It's not his fault. The long-term injuries have been unfortunate. I mean, he's in the wrong simulation in life right now because they're not reoccurring injuries. These are all freak accidents and injuries. But I don't know, I've always felt like sometimes as FOFANA put himself in these positions with this kind of rash tackling style, I feel like maybe he puts in a bit more than he should, and I feel like he's at the receiving ends of misfortune based on his defensive style. I don't know, only my thoughts and opinions. You don't have to listen to what I'm saying too strongly on this. Right now, with our interest and efforts for Howson, and I can't imagine us maybe completely ignoring this Marc Guéhi, interest this summer too. Do we decide to do some crazy things? Goodbye Disasi. Chalobah, at the moment, reports seem to suggest he could be going. I think it would be a massive mistake. I don't even think there's much of a difference between Chalobah and FOFANA. People might think there is, but then what can you tell me over the last 3 years or the last 4 years? What has he done consistently to give you that confidence still? And this is why I made the point about certain players are just in this eternal potential FC bracket. And I think right now, we can't just fully rely upon that. Now, he's recovering now from his surgery. He'll be out for the next few months, which means that when he does get back to fitness, he'll need maybe a month just to find himself in the field again, and it just continues the cycle. So it does feel like Fofana's future is determined on the quality of offer that we receive. The fact that we've opened the door to a potential loan exit or sale, does that also bring up interesting questions behind the scenes around how the club feel about Fofana's long-term health and ability? Maybe they feel like this could be the prime time to get the maximum amount of money for him, or, as we've discussed, the other option, playing in an environment which allows him to play week in, week out is best for him right now. But you could argue, why is it not good for him here once he returns back from injury? Unless, of course, we are prioritizing now 2 other centre-backs instead. So it's going to be really interesting times. I feel like I was suspecting there would be some surprises in store for us this summer. Some surprise exits. I think there'll be some surprise signings we make, because every single summer there's non-stop surprises going in, coming out. So let's see what happens with Wesley FOFANA. Do you guys agree with this news? Does this news annoy you? Or do you feel like right now the centre-back market is hot? It's popping right now, and we can find alternatives for good fees that we might not be able to get in other windows? Let us know below. Now, I want to discuss the quick reports coming out from Germany in regards to Petrovic, Kobel, and Borussia Dortmund players that we are showing interest in. Now, to start off with things, Leverkusen seem to be increasing their efforts for George Petrovic. They see him as their number one at this point in time. Let's see what happens there. But moving on to Kobel, we know that his agent was in London to try and open up some discussions to find, a future for his client. Ideally, Kobel wants to sign for a club that has Champions League football. He's a bit bored that Dortmund aren't winning things now. He's in his peak years at 27 years old. He needs to leave. And we have expressed that long-term interest in him. Today, we've learned that Dortmund have slapped a £51 million valuation on Kobel's head, which is quite a little bit pricey. I know it's not been the best season for him, but he has done some big things, especially in Dortmund's CL run. Where they lost 2-0 to Real Madrid. So he does have some talent. But the question is then, are we potentially thinking about a merry-go-round where you cash in on Petrovic, reinvest that money into Kobel, and then, I don't know what you do with the rest of the goalkeepers that you've already got under your books? There has to be some balance, right? I think we have too many keepers, and in my opinion, it will be too irresponsible to sign another keeper. Like, if you're not backing one of the guys that you've splashed money on, then it's not giving me much confidence about the decision-making at the top right. From my perspective, I look at this story and I think, you know what? Kobel's agent knows that he has to find a new club for his clients. He'll discuss, terms and opportunities and possibilities with every single club that's about right. I think that's quite normal, but I'd be very surprised if the club decided to waste time on signing a goalkeeper that was not needed whatsoever. I think what's more realistic is that we possibly engineer a player exchange style deal involving chukwuemeka, and our interest in long-term Dortmund outfield players like Adeyemi, bynoe-gittens, with reports really intensifying that bynoe-gittens could be the favourite we turn to at this point in time. And it makes sense because on one hand, chukwuemeka could make a permanent move to Dortmund, which I think ideally he wants to remain there. And for us, we're signing a young, talented left winger who, in my opinion, wouldn't necessarily be the number one guy. And I've just had this thought in my head that if you're targeting Gittens, I think maybe you keep Jadon Sancho to have that bit of experience and youth supporting each other, complementing each other, and competing against each other, because you're waiting for Kenda to arrive next year. We can't just ignore Kenda. It has ended the season really strong, and I think he'll blow up even more next season. And when he comes to us, having Kenda on the left, Estevan on the right-hand side, that is going to be incredibly exciting at this football club. So that's how I see things at the moment. That's where the merry-go-round is set to take place. And I guess ultimately, to ask you guys this question, do you just not want to see any Dortmund players come into the club? Or do you feel like there could be some smart business involving chukwuemeka staying there and us maybe getting our hands on one of their stars? Let us know where you fall on this. And for the final reports, we discussed the latest surrounding Osimhen, because Uncle Obi Mikel revealed to media that Victor still wants to play for us. We all know he's a long-term Chelsea fan. He wants to kind of, replicate what Drogba did here all those years back. And Mikel feels like it's very likely he's going to be coming to the Premier League this summer. Now, Mikel revealed that he knows exactly where negotiations stopped. It's a pretty much easy fix. It can happen. But most of the hard work we've done was in the summer, so it wouldn't be that long for us to continue negotiations and make things happen. And if we don't sign him, Mikel reveals that either one of Arsenal or Man United are going to show a lot of interest. Now, I think this story is pretty, I just find it really fascinating. There's a lot of ifs and buts surrounding Osimhen and his future. As we all know, there's a 75 mil release clause you can sign him for. That's around 60 plus million pounds for a guy that has been winning titles, a guy that's conquered, scoring in many countries right now. Recently, just scoring for fun every single week for Galatasaray with 30 plus goals. This is someone who you're signing at an age where he's about to peak right now, which makes him even more exciting. There's even more to come from players like this. And as Mikel himself said, listen, one of the issues that we've had recently is that we do not take our chances. We miss too many opportunities. If we had someone that had a better conversion rate or gave us different possibilities, attacking balls inside the box, we'd have a few more points. And to be fair, in hindsight, because I like to learn from my mistakes and, try and learn lessons from seasons, I'm always being that guy. I can see now I would not be opposed to signing Osimhen if the money's right. If a deal is feasible, I think would actually help Nicholas Jackson because, I just think that Nico needs maybe some competition alongside him. And us as a squad and a team, we need to be able to rely upon having two strikers. Many games this season, I've wanted Nico to get subbed off maybe from the 60th, 70th minute. We don't have that option to turn to afterwards. So I guess it's no surprise why Nico just wasn't physically able to maintain his best form throughout the season because he was the only striker solution that we had. So let's see what happens with this story. But let's remember why things failed for our efforts to sign him on deadline day. And that essentially came down to not agreeing on a wage packet. Now, we negotiated them so many months that I just, when we were getting to that crunch point of deadline day, I thought, okay, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to just offer him the wages that he's communicated for a long time that he wants. Now, originally, Osimhen wanted around 500k euros a week, but that was before tax. And we negotiated that down to 350,000, which is just under 300,000 a week, which seems okay and fair. But I think the gamble that ruined this deal on deadline day was that it seemed like we were changing the terms and we were trying to use the pressure of deadline day against Victor to get him to agree to signing for us on our terms and not his terms. Obviously, we thought we had a good chance because when Al Nassr or Al Hilal, I can't remember, weren't able to get the deal signed because Napoli all of a sudden decided they wanted 5 million extra, even though Osimhen agreed to signing a 40 million a year deal with them with a very favourable release clause inserted. I think the club thought, bingo, where else is this guy going to go? We can sign him for the fees we want. But we didn't respect that Osimhen, of course, has his principles. Galatasaray was the option. He's like, well, listen, if I accept your terms, which weren't necessarily the best, and I'm going to break down exactly what those terms were. We offered 4 million up front for the year with 4 million in bonuses. That's a lot of money to offer in bonuses, yeah? I'm surprised it wasn't even 6.5 million up front and then maybe an additional 3.5 million in bonuses. And the money Victor wants, the 10 million pounds, that isn't necessarily 10 million pounds up front. That's going to include the goal scoring bonuses, clauses, certain extra bonuses for winning titles and getting achievements, etc., etc. That's how these deals work. So just don't assume that it's 10 million fixed fees straight up cash. Not many players are getting deals like that unless you're top 10, top 15, right? So the bonuses we offered, the 4 million, half the salary offer essentially got broken down into this. It was 2 million if he helped us secure Champions League qualification, and an additional 2 million for meeting certain scoring, targets, which is, I guess, interesting, but I don't think it's the most respectful offer for a player like Osimhen, who literally on the Scudetto with Napoli, and is one of the top 10 strikers in Europe. Let's keep that brutally honest and brutally real. So, I don't know. If we were to go back in for him, we have to respect him with a better offer. But equally, does Osimhen have to maybe reduce his salary demands a bit? Because we've learned from British outlets, a lot of clubs, especially in this country, have some reservations on, number one, the money he wants, and number two, his attitude. But honestly, when I read the attitude reports, they really annoyed me. I think it's incredibly insecure, very insecure. Was it not this same attitudes that helped him score in all these countries, win trophies and titles for the clubs he was playing for? The personality that he shows in the field, that fearlessness, that bravery. I think it's absolute nonsense, to be fair with you. And I say it's insecure because let's use us as the example. We probably still have fears of how Lukaku's time ended here. I think there was contextual reasons. So I think the Lukaku thing was just like a powder keg waiting to happen, because you got to see it like this. He tried to make it happen at Chelsea 3 times in a row. On the third time, he made him the highest earning player in the club's history. 325k, 350 a week. Tuchel promised him this, the club promised him that. And when Lukaku felt like those promises obviously weren't being met, I think his reaction in hindsight wasn't the best, because he let down his teammates with that ill-timed interview, kind of blindsiding people and not allowing the possibilities to try and reach conclusions internally. That was the big mistake he made. I think he lost a lot of respect from everyone at that time there. But I don't think we should be using that Lukaku time as some insecure nonsense to stop us going for Osimhen, if that possibility is there, if the player still wants to come here. Because I just think ideally now, I think bare minimum, we have to be a club that is just securing Champions League football, even during our worst seasons. But at what point are we going to be ready now to mount a title challenge? I think we need to find that bit of balance. We've read reports that we will turn towards certain experience if, of course, the value and stuff is there. And this is why, for myself, I pray we get Champions League spots this end of the season, because if we do, I guarantee there's going to be a lot more ambitious names that we get linked to in the window, because it's simply this. We're going to need an even stronger squads that can compete playing Champions League nights and domestically. And that's why the ambition is set to grow. So, my friends, that's all the reports and stories today. How do you feel about Osimhen? Do you think something can still happen here? It would kind of be painful watching him go to Arsenal or Man United, right? And I think with how he plays, I think he would complement us for sure. I think Nico could learn from him. And I think that type of personality up front, having a striker that can really put fear into centre-backs, that could give us a bit of an edge going forward. So that's all the reports, my guys and girls. Get involved. Let us know how you're feeling. And I will catch you again tonight as I'm releasing my Dean House analysis. So don't miss out. Catch you guys then. Cool.